How are you guys doing? Today is Monday, October 25th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to review the Elite matchups and performances that took place yesterday on Sunday, October 24th. And of course, just to take a quick look at where we are at this point in the season, the MLB World Series are just going to get underway as there are only 2 teams out of the 30 MLB teams that are competing for the 2021 MLB title. In the NFL and college football, there is football underway as we just got through with yesterday's 7th Sunday of the NFL season. And not to mention that there is soccer underway too, as I will get into a lot of the soccer matches that were played. Not to mention that the NBA is also underway. Not to mention the NHL as college basketball looks to pick up in about a couple more weeks. Starting first with baseball, the World Series will resume on Tuesday as the Houston Astros, the American League champs, are going to host the Atlanta Braves, the National League champs. Charlie Morton's going to make the start for Atlanta as Framber Valdez will make the start for the Houston Astros. And of course, as we inch closer to that game, of course, I'll get into that tomorrow as well. And then taking a look at what's going on next with the NFL, because yesterday was the 7th Sunday of the NFL season. Starting off in Miami, the Miami Dolphins hosted the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons would end up beating the Dolphins 30-28 as the game did come down to a Young Hui Ko field goal. So that's another game-winning field goal for the elite kicker. For the Miami Dolphins in this matchup, they would end up the Falcons outscored the Dolphins 13-7 in the first half. The Dolphins outscored the Falcons 21-17 in the second half, but it wouldn't be enough. For the Dolphins, their elite starting quarterback Tua Tagovailoa threw for 291 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 picks as he completed 32 of his 40 passes. He also ran for an additional 29 yards. That is 320 total yards of offense. The Dolphins' leading rusher was Myles Gaskin. He finished with 67 yards on 15 carries. He would also go on to finish with 10 yards on 4 receptions as he had a touchdown. That is 77 total yards of offense. The Dolphins' leading receiver was Mike Gesicki. He had 7 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown. Their second leading receiver was Jalen Waddle out of Alabama. He had 7 receptions for 83 yards. On the defensive side of the ball, Eric Rowe would lead the Dolphins in tackles as he had 9 of them. And the Dolphins' elite cornerback, Xavier Howard, would go on to finish with 2 tackles and an interception. For the Atlanta Falcons, their elite starting quarterback, Matt Ryan, would complete 25 of his 40 passes, throwing for 336 yards and 2 touchdowns. He would also lose a fumble as well. But regardless, on the Falcons' receiving end, their leading receiver was their tight end, their first-round tight end, Kyle Pitts. He finished with 7 receptions for 163 yards. The Falcons' second leading receiver was Russell Gage. He had 4 receptions for 67 yards, and he had one of Matt Ryan's 2 receiving touchdowns. On the defensive side of the ball, the Falcons were led in tackles by Deion Jones. He had 15 tackles, including the team's only sack. Foysad Olakun would finish with 13 tackles as he finished with an interception. And then Jalen Hawkins would finish with the team's other interception. With this win, the Atlanta Falcons are now 3-3. That is the 3rd best record in the NFC South. With this loss, the Miami Dolphins are 1-6. That is the worst record in the AFC East at the moment. Jumping out to Baltimore, the Ravens hosted the Cincinnati Bengals coming into this matchup. The Ravens had a 5-1 record, and the Bengals were 4-2. The Bengals ended up beating the Ravens 41-17. The Bengals outscored Baltimore 13-10 in the first half, and they went on to thrash the Ravens 28-7 in the second half. For the Ravens in this matchup, their elite starting quarterback Lamar Jackson would complete 15 of his 31 passes, throwing for 257 yards and a touchdown. He also was the team's leading rusher with 88 yards on 12 carries. That is 345 total yards of offense. The Ravens' leading receiver was Marquise Brown. He had 5 receptions for 80 yards and a touchdown. Also, Rashad Bateman had 80 yards. He had it on 3 receptions for himself. On the defensive side of the ball, Anthony Averitt and Marlon Humphrey, their elite corner, would lead the team in tackles as they both had 7 of them. Marlon Humphrey would also have the team's only interception, the game's only interception. And for the Cincinnati Bengals, their starting quarterback, the number 1 overall pick from the 2020 NFL Draft, Joe Burrow, would throw for 416 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. The Bengals' leading rusher, Joe Mixon, would finish with 59 yards on 12 carries as he had a touchdown. Their second leading rusher out of Oklahoma, Samaje Perine, would finish with 11 carries for 52 yards and a rushing touchdown. Perine also had 1 reception for 23 yards. That is 75 total yards of offense. The Bengals' leading receiver was their rookie wide receiver, Jamar Chase, out of LSU. He finished with 201 yards on 8 receptions as he finished with a touchdown. Their second leading receiver was CJ Uzoma, who finished with 3 receptions for 91 yards as he had 2 touchdowns. On the defensive side of the ball for the Bengals, Logan Wilson and Jesse Bates III led the team in tackles as they had 7 of them. Larry Ogunjobi would finish with 6 tackles as he had a sack and a half. Sam Hubbard finished with 5 tackles as he had 2.5 sacks. With this win, the Cincinnati Bengals are 5-2. They are 3-1 on the road, and they are now tied with the Baltimore Ravens for the best record in the AFC North. With this loss, the Ravens are now 5-2. They are 3-1 at home as that was their first home loss, and they are now tied with the Cincinnati Bengals for the best record in the division. So, of course, very big game between these two teams, and now the Bengals are now the number 1 team just off of tiebreakers in this division. Jumping out to Green Bay, the Green Bay Packers hosted the Washington football team, and they were able to beat Washington 24-10. Green Bay outscored Washington 14-7 in the first half, and then proceeded to outscore Washington 10-3 in the second half. For the Washington football team, they were led by their starting quarterback, Taylor Heineke. He threw for 268 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He also ran for 95 yards as he was Washington's leading rusher. He finished with 363 total yards of offense. Washington's leading receiver was Terry McLaurin. He finished with 7 receptions for 122 yards and a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Landon Collins would be Washington's leading tackler. He had 7 of the team's tackles. Jonathan Allen only had 2 tackles, but his 2 tackles ended up being sacks for the team. For the Green Bay Packers, their goated starting quarterback Aaron Rodgers would complete 27 of his 35 passes. He threw for 274 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also ran for 17 additional yards. That is 291 total yards of offense. The Packers' leading receiver was their elite wide receiver, Davante Adams. He finished with 6 receptions for 76 yards and a receiving touchdown. Their second leading receiver was Robert Tonyan. He had 4 receptions for 63 yards and a touchdown. Also, their third leading receiver, Allen Lazard, had 5 receptions for 60 yards as he had a touchdown as well. On the defensive side of the ball, Devondre Campbell would finish with 13 total tackles on the day. Rashawn Gary finished with 7 tackles as he had 2 sacks. Kingsley Keke finished with 6 tackles as he had a sack and a half. And Chandon Sullivan would finish with the team's only interception as he finished with 4 tackles. With this win, the Green Bay Packers are 6-1. They are 3-0. They are undefeated at home. With this loss, the Washington football team is 2-5 on the season as they are 1-2 on the road. The Packers at 6-1 have the best record in the NFC North by 2.5 games over the Minnesota Vikings. And with this loss, the Washington football team is now tied with the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants for the worst record in the NFC East at the moment. Jumping out to Boston, the New England Patriots hosted the New York Jets. The Patriots would beat the Jets 54-13 after they outscored the Jets 31-7 in the first half. They outscored New York 23-6 in the second half, so it was complete domination in both halves. For the New York Jets, they were led by their starting quarterback, the number 2 overall pick from the 2021 NFL Draft, Zach Wilson. Wilson threw for 51 yards before getting replaced by Mike White. Mike White threw for 202 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. The Jets' leading receiver was Michael Carter. He finished with 8 receptions for 67 yards. On the defensive side of the ball, Marcus May would lead the team in tackles as he had 12 of them. Ashton Davis would finish with 11 tackles for the team. For the New England Patriots, they were led by their rookie starting quarterback, Mac Jones. He threw for 307 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Patriots' leading rusher was Damian Harris. He finished with 14 carries for 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. He would also finish with 2 receptions for 7 yards through the air. That's 113 total yards of offense. Their second leading rusher, J.J. Taylor, finished with 9 carries for 21 yards as he had 2 touchdowns. He also had 5 yards through the air, so that's 26 total yards of offense with his 2 touchdowns. The Patriots' leading receiver was Brandon Bolden. He had 6 receptions for 79 yards as he had a touchdown. The Patriots' fourth leading receiver, Nelson Aguilar, finished with 2 receptions for 51 yards as he had a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Kyle Duggar would lead the Patriots in tackles as he had 9 of them. Miles Bryan, my former classmate from Loyola, but the safety for the Patriots, would finish with 6 tackles as he finished with a sack for himself. Kyle Duggar and J.C. Jackson would finish with the team's 2 interceptions. With this win, the New England Patriots are 3-4. They are 1-4 at home, and they are currently holding on to the second best record in the AFC East as they sit behind the Buffalo Bills. With this loss, the New York Jets are 1-5 as they are currently holding on to the third best record in the AFC East, sitting behind the New England Patriots and sitting ahead of the last place Miami Dolphins. Jumping out to New York, the New York Giants hosted the Carolina Panthers. The Giants would end up beating the Panthers 25-3 after they outscored Carolina 5-3 in the first half, and they would shut Carolina out 20-0 in the second half. The Panthers did score the first field goal of the game, but the Giants would slowly bring it back. The Giants first scored off of a safety, and they would take the lead off of a Graham Gano field goal that made the score 5-3 in the first place. Looking at how things went for the Carolina Panthers, their starting quarterback, Sam Darnold, would throw for 111 yards and an interception. Their leading receiver was DJ Moore. He had 6 receptions for 73 yards. On the defensive side of the ball, Sean Chandler and Jeremy Chin each finished with 8 tackles, both leading the team. And then for the New York Giants, they were led by their starting quarterback out of my Duke, Daniel Jones. He ended up throwing for 203 yards and an interception. He also ran for 28 yards. That's 231 total yards of offense. They were led in rushing by Devontae Booker. Devontae Booker finished with 51 yards on 14 carries as he had a touchdown. He also had 15 yards through the air. That's 66 total yards of offense. They were led in receiving by Darius Slayton, who had 5 receptions for 63 yards. On the defensive side of the ball for the Giants, Tay Crowder and Leonard Williams led the team in tackles. Leonard Williams' 6 tackles were accompanied by his 1.5 sacks. James Bradbury would finish with 2 tackles as he also recovered a fumble and also finished with an interception on the day. Azeez Ojulari would finish with 5 tackles as he finished with 2.5 sacks. With this win, the New York Giants are 2-5 as they are 1-3 at home. They are tied with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington football team for the worst record in the NFC East. With this loss, the Carolina Panthers are now 3-4. They are 1-2 on the road, and they currently hold the worst record in the NFC South at the moment as they sit half a game behind the Atlanta Falcons. Jumping out to Nashville, the Tennessee Titans hosted the reigning AFC champs Kansas City Chiefs, and the Titans would end up beating the Chiefs 27-3 as all 27 of their points were scored in the first half. The Chiefs' only 3 points would come after the Titans scored their 27 in the third quarter. For the defending AFC champs Kansas City Chiefs, they were led by their elite starting quarterback Patrick Mahomes. He ended up completing 20 of his 35 passes as he threw for 206 yards and an interception. He also ran for 35 yards. That's 241 total yards of offense after he was helped off the field after a pretty big hit. The Chiefs' leading receiver was Byron Pringle. He finished with 5 receptions for 73 yards. Also, their elite tight end Travis Kelce would finish with 7 receptions for 65 yards on the day. On the defensive, on the defensive side of the ball, Nick Bolton would lead the team in tackles as he finished with 15 tackles on the day, as he finished with 4 tackles for loss. And Willie Gay would finish with the team's only interception as he finished with 2 tackles on the day. For the Tennessee Titans, their starting quarterback, Ryan Tannehill, would end up throwing for 270 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He also ran for 6 yards, an additional touchdown. He had 276 total yards of offense to go along with his 2 touchdowns. The Titans' leading rusher was their elite running back, Derrick Henry. He finished with 29 carries for 86 yards. He also would end up completing his only pass for 5 yards, as his passing touchdown was his only touchdown of the day. He would also finish with 16 yards on or through the air. That would be 102 total yards from scrimmage, and then add in his passing yards as 107 total yards that he's responsible for yesterday. The Titans' leading receiver was A.J. Brown. He had 8 receptions for 133 yards and a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Dan Cruikshank would finish with 8 tackles alongside David Long Jr. and Elijah Molden. On the line, Danico Autry would finish with 3 tackles, as 2 of his 3 tackles ended up being sacks. And then Rashaan Evans, alongside his 4 tackles, would finish with the team's only interception. With this win, the Tennessee Titans are 5-2. They are now 3-1 at home, and they are now holding on to the best record in the AFC South. With this loss, the Kansas City Chiefs are 3-4. They are tied with the Denver Broncos for the worst record in the AFC West. They are now 2-2 on the road. Jumping out to Los Angeles, the LA Rams hosted the Detroit Lions as the 2 quarterbacks that were swapped for one another would face off. In this matchup, the Rams would beat the Lions 28-19. The Rams outscored the Lions 17-16 in the first half. The Lions would score 3 in the third quarter to take the lead, but the Rams would score 11 in the fourth quarter to get the lead back and the win. For the Detroit Lions, who still have yet to win a game this season, their starting quarterback, the former Rams first overall pick in the draft, Jared Goff, would throw for 268 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. The Lions' leading receiver was Khalif Raymond. He finished with 115 yards on 6 receptions. Their second leading receiver was their second leading rusher, DeAndre Swift. Swift finished with 48 yards on 13 carries. He also had 8 receptions for 96 yards. That is 144 total yards of offense from DeAndre Swift. On the defensive side of the ball for the Lions, Jalen Reeves-Maybin would lead the team in tackles as he had 9 of them. And then for the Los Angeles Rams, their starting quarterback, Matthew Stafford, would throw for 334 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their leading receiver, Cooper Kupp, would finish with 10 receptions for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the defensive side of the ball, Jordan Fuller would lead the team in tackles as he had 9 of them. Their elite cornerback, Jalen Ramsey, would finish with 6 tackles, as he also finished with a 25-yard interception on his 27th birthday, I might add. And also Nick Scott would finish with an interception as well. With this win, the Los Angeles Rams are 6-1. That is the second best record in the NFC West, behind the only team that's still undefeated in the NFL, the Arizona Cardinals. The Rams are now 3-1 at home. With this loss, the Detroit Lions are 0-7. They are the only team in the NFL that still has yet to win a game this season. So they are the last team that still has yet to win, and they are currently holding the worst record in the NFC North. They are now 0-4 on the road at this point in time. Jumping out to Vegas, the Las Vegas Raiders hosted the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champs for the 2017 season. And the Raiders would end up beating the Eagles 33-22 after Las Vegas outscored Philadelphia 17-7 in the first half. They would outscore the Eagles 16-15 in the second half, but the Eagles, it just wouldn't be enough to overcome this deficit. For the Eagles, their starting quarterback, Jalen Hurts, would throw for 236 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also was the team's leading rusher as he had 61 yards on 13 carries. That would end up being a total of 297 total yards of offense for Jalen Hurts specifically. Their leading receiver was Dallas Goedert. He finished with 3 receptions for 70 yards. On the defensive side of the ball, Marcus Epps would lead the team in tackles as he had 11 of them. The team would not finish with a single sack, but Avonte Maddox would finish with the team's only interception. That would go along with Maddox's 3 tackles for the day. For the Las Vegas Raiders, their starting quarterback, Derek Carr, would complete 31 of his 34 passes, only throwing 3 incompletions. He would throw for 323 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception, as his interception was one of his 3 passes that he didn't complete. Their leading rusher was Kenyon Drake out of Alabama. Kenyon Drake finished with 14 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown. He also had 10 yards through the air, as that combines for 79 total yards of offense. Their leading rusher was their elite running back, Josh Jacobs. He had 6 carries for 29 yards and a touchdown. He also had 3 receptions for 39 yards through the air. That would be a total of 68 total yards of offense. The Raiders' leading receiver was Foster Moreau. He had 6 receptions for 60 yards as he had one of Derek Carr's 2 passing touchdowns. The Raiders' defense was led and tackled by Brandon Fasison. He finished with 9 tackles on the day. Yannick Ngakoue would finish with 4 tackles as he had both of the Raiders' sacks for the day. With this win, the Las Vegas Raiders are now 5-2. That is the best record in the AFC West, as they are now 3-1 at home in Las Vegas. With this loss, the Philadelphia Eagles are now 2-5. They are tied with the Washington football team and the New York Giants for the worst record in the NFC East. And they are currently sitting at 2-2 on the road following their last matchup. Jumping out to Phoenix, the Arizona Cardinals hosted the Houston Texans, and the Cardinals would beat the Texans 31-5 to be the only remaining team that is still the only team in the NFL that is still undefeated through 7 weeks of the season. The Cardinals outscored the Texans 17-5 in the first half after the Texans were the only team to score in the first quarter off of a safety, and then the Cardinals would end up shutting the Titans out 14-0 in the second half. For the Houston Texans, they were led by their starting quarterback, Davis Mills. He threw for 135 yards on the day. On the defensive side of the ball for the Texans, Lonnie Johnson Jr. would lead the team in tackles. He had 9 tackles. Jonathan Greenard had 4 tackles as he had 2 sacks, 2 of the team's 4. And Lonnie Johnson Jr., in addition to leading the team in tackles, would finish with the team's only interception for the day. Looking at the Arizona Cardinals, their elite starting quarterback, Kyler Murray, would end up completing 20 of his 28 passes. He threw for 261 yards as he threw for 3 touchdowns and an interception. He would also run for 10 yards on the ground. That's 271 total yards of offense. Their leading rusher was Chase Edmonds. He had 15 carries for 81 yards. He also had a 9-yard reception. That's 90 total yards of offense. Their second leading rusher was James Conner. He had 64 yards on 10 carries as he had a touchdown. The Cardinals' leading receiver was Zach Ertz. The former Philly tight end finished with 3 receptions for 66 yards and a touchdown. Their third leading receiver was their elite wide receiver out of Clemson, DeAndre Hopkins. He finished with 7 receptions for 53 yards and a touchdown. Their fourth leading receiver, Christian Kirk, finished with 4 receptions for 50 yards as he had a receiving touchdown as well. On the defensive side of the ball for the Cardinals, they were led in tackles by Isaiah Simmons. He finished with 8 tackles on the day, and Marcus Golden finished with 3 tackles as 2 of his 3 tackles were sacks. He had both of the Cardinals' sacks for the day. With this win, the Arizona Cardinals are 7-0. That is the best record in the NFC West and the best record in the NFL. The Cardinals are the NFL's last remaining undefeated team. With this loss, the Houston Texans are 1-6. That is the worst record in the AFC South. They are now 0-4 on the road, just to get a sense of where the Houston Texans sit. Jumping out to Tampa Bay, the reigning Super Bowl champs Buccaneers hosted the Chicago Bears in what would be yet another tough start for Justin Fields. The Buccaneers outscored the Bears 35-3 in the first half, and as Tom Brady would end up throwing his 600th career touchdown. And then, of course, Chicago would end up getting outscored 3-0 in the second half as well. For the Bears in this matchup, starting out on the losing end, they were led by their elite starting quarterback, Justin Fields. Fields completed 22 of his 32 passes as he threw for 184 yards and 3 interceptions. He also finished with 8 carries for 38 yards. That would end up being 222 total yards of offense. The Bears' leading rusher was Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert would finish with 18 carries for 100 yards on the day. He also had 5 receptions for 33 yards. That's 133 total yards of offense for him. On the defensive side of the ball for the Chicago Bears, they were led in tackles by Roquan Smith out of Georgia. He finished with 13 tackles. DeAndre Houston, Carson, and Eddie Jackson would also finish with 11 tackles for themselves. The team would not register a sack or an interception. On the other end of the spectrum, on the winning end for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their goated starting quarterback Tom Brady would complete 20 of his 36 passes. He threw for 211 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Buccaneers were led in rushing by their starting running back Leonard Fournette. He finished with 15 carries for 81 yards as he had a rushing touchdown on the day. The Buccaneers were led in receiving by Chris Godwin. Godwin finished with 8 receptions for 111 yards and a touchdown. Their elite wide receiver, Mike Evans, would finish with 6 receptions for 76 yards. He had 3 receiving touchdowns, one of them being Tom Brady's 600th career touchdown. And, of course, the fan gave it back after Mike Evans gave it to a fan, and the fan got a bunch of lifetime stuff from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, of course. Looking at the defensive side of the ball for the Buccaneers, they were led in tackles by their elite linebacker, Devin White. He would finish with 10 tackles and a fumble recovery. D. Delaney, Jordan Whitehead, and Pierre Desir would finish with the team's 3 interceptions. Jason Pierre-Paul would finish with 4 tackles as he finished with 2 of the team's sacks. And then, of course, Shaq Barrett would finish with a fumble recovery of his own to go along with his 3 tackles and his sack. With this win, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the defending Super Bowl champs, are now 6-1. That is the best record in the NFC South, as they are also undefeated. They are 4-0 at home. With this loss, the Chicago Bears are now 3-4. That is the 3rd best record in the NFC North, as they are now 1-3 on the road this season. And then last but not least, taking a look at what went down in last night's Sunday Night Football matchup as the San Francisco 49ers hosted the Indianapolis Colts. In this matchup, the Colts would end up beating the 49ers 30-18. The Colts outscored San Francisco 13-12 in the first half, and they outscored San Francisco 17-6 in the second half. For the 49ers in this matchup, their starting quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo would throw for 181 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher, Elijah Mitchell, would finish with 18 carries for 107 yards and a touchdown. The 49ers' leading receiver was Deebo Samuel. He finished with 7 receptions for 100 yards and a receiving touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Josh Norman would finish with 10 tackles as he led the team in. He would be the only player that finished with double-digit tackles. For the Indianapolis Colts in this matchup, they were led by Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz would end up throwing for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also ran for 23 yards and an additional touchdown. That's 173 total yards and 3 total touchdowns for Carson Wentz. The Colts' leading rusher was Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin. He finished with 18 carries for 107 yards and a touchdown. He also had 3 yards on 3 receptions, so that's 110 total yards of offense. The Colts were led in receiving by Michael Pittman Jr. He finished with 4 receptions for 105 yards and a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, they were led in tackles by Kenny Moore II and their elite linebacker Darius Leonard. They each finished with 7 tackles on the day. The team finished with 2 sacks, both of them coming from DeForest Buckner and Al-Qadim Muhammad. Xavier Rhodes and Kari Willis would finish with the 2 interceptions of the day for Indianapolis. With this win, the Colts are 3-4. That is the second best record in the AFC South, as they are now 2-2 on the road. With this loss, the San Francisco 49ers are 2-4. That is the third best record in the NFC West at the moment, as they are now tied with the Seattle Seahawks for the time being. And, of course, they are now 0-3 at home. Last matchup to look forward to for this Week 7 will be the matchup between the Seattle Seahawks and the New Orleans Saints tonight. And then, of course, with that said, taking a look first at what's going on with the NBA before I leave this continent. Starting off in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Nets hosted the Charlotte Hornets. The Hornets would end up beating the Nets 111-95 after the Charlotte Hornets ended up outscoring the Nets by 9 in the third quarter and by 15 in the fourth. That's a combined 24-point deficit for the second half. For the Brooklyn Nets, they were led in scoring by their go-to power forward out of Texas, Kevin Durant. He finished with 38 points and 5 rebounds alongside 3 assists in 36 minutes. Durant shot 17 for 24 from the field, 2 for 6 from 3, and a perfect 2 for 2 from the foul line. Their elite starting shooting guard, James Harden, would finish with 15 points, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists alongside 8 turnovers in 33 minutes. Harden shot 6 for 16 from the field, 2 for 8 from 3, and he made his only free throw of the night. For the Charlotte Hornets, they were led in scoring by their starting small forward out of Michigan State, Miles Bridges. He finished with 32 points, 9 rebounds, and a couple of steals in 35 minutes, as he shot 9 for 16 from the field, 3 for 5 from 3, and 11 from 12 from the free throw line. Their elite starting point guard, LaMelo Ball, would finish with 18 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists in 26 minutes. He shot 8 for 18 from the field, and he would end up shooting 1 for 6 from 3, and he would end up making his only free throw of the night. With this win, the Charlotte Hornets are now 3-0 to start their season, and the Brooklyn Nets are now 1-2 thus far. Jumping out to New York, or I guess staying within New York, but jumping out to Madison Square Garden, the New York Knicks hosted the Orlando Magic. The Magic were able to beat the Knicks 110-104 after outscoring the Knicks by 12 in the fourth quarter to overcome their 6-point deficit to win the game by 6, to pick up their first win of the season and to give the Knicks their first loss of the season. For the New York Knicks in this matchup, they were led in scoring by their starting power forward, Julius Randle. The former All-Star finished with 30 points, 16 rebounds, 2 steals, and 4 blocks in 38 minutes. He shot 8 for 24 from the field and 12 for 14 from the foul line. Off the bench, their former MVP point guard, Derrick Rose, finished with 23 points, 5 rebounds, and a couple of steals. He did all this in the span of 29 minutes as he shot 9 for 16 from the field and 5 for 8 from 3. Their elite starting point guard, Kemba Walker, would finish with 10 points and 3 assists in 19 minutes as he shot 4 for 8 from the field and 2 for 5 from 3. For the Orlando Magic, they were led in scoring by their starting point guard, Cole Anthony. He finished with 29 points, 16 rebounds, and 8 assists in 35 minutes. He shot 9 for 16 from the field, 5 for 9 from 3, and 6 for 7 from the free throw line. Off the bench, the Magic shooting guard with Terrence Ross would finish with 22 points in 31 minutes. He shot 6 for 11 from the field, and he shot 8 for 9 from the foul line. With this win, the Orlando Magic are 1-2, and with this loss, the New York Knicks are 2-1. Jumping out to Houston, the Houston Rockets hosted the Boston Celtics. The Celtics would end up beating the Rockets 107-97. The big difference would be the middle 2 quarters. The Celtics outscored the Rockets by 10 points in the second quarter and by 15 points in the third quarter. For the Rockets in this matchup, they were led in scoring by their starting shooting guard, their rookie Jalen Green. He finished with 30 points in 36 minutes. He would end up shooting 11 for 18 from the field, and he shot 8 for 10 from 3. Their starting center, Christian Wood, would finish with 20 points and 9 rebounds in 36 minutes. He shot 5 for 14 from the field, and he would also end up shooting 2 for 4 from 3 and 8 for 10 from the foul line. For the Boston Celtics, they were led in scoring by their elite starting small forward, Jason Tatum. He finished with 31 points and 9 rebounds, as well as two assists in 37 minutes. He shot 12 for 24 from the field, 4 for 11 from 3, and 3 for 4 from the foul line. With this win, the Boston Celtics are 1-2, and with this loss, the Houston Rockets are now 1-2 as well. Jumping out to Oklahoma City, the Thunder hosted the Philadelphia 76ers, the team that finished with the best record in the Eastern Conference last year. And the Sixers would end up beating the OKC Thunder 115-103. The difference would be the first quarter, where the Sixers outscored the Thunder by 10. For the Oklahoma City Thunder in this matchup, following this loss, their starting shooting guard, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, would finish with 29 points, 6 rebounds, and 8 assists in 39 minutes. He would shoot 9 for 19 from the field and 10 for 12 from the foul line. For the Philadelphia 76ers, following this win, their starting shooting guard out of Duke, Seth Curry, would finish with 28 points in 34 minutes. He shot 9 for 15 from the field, 7 for 10 from 3, and 3 for 4 from the foul line. Their elite starting center out of Kansas, Joel Embiid, finished with 22 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, and 3 blocks in 33 minutes. He shot 8 for 15 from the field, 2 for 5 from 3, and 4 for 6 from the foul line. With this win, the Philadelphia 76ers are 2-1, and with this loss, the Oklahoma City Thunder are now 0-3. Jumping up to Sacramento in a battle of the Northern California teams, the Sacramento Kings faced off against the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors were able to beat the Kings 119-107, as they still have yet to lose a game this season. For the Sacramento Kings in this matchup, they were led in scoring by their starting small forward out of North Carolina, Harrison Barnes. Barnes finished with 24 points and 7 rebounds in 36 minutes. He shot 7 for 13 from the field, 5 for 10 from 3, and 5 for 8 from the foul line. Their rookie starting point guard, Davion Mitchell, would go on to finish with 22 points on the day in 32 minutes. He shot 9 for 16 from the field and 3 for 8 from 3. First 20-point game for the March Madness champion. And then for the Golden State Warriors, they were led in scoring by their goated starting point guard, Stephen Curry out of Davidson. Curry would finish with 27 points, 7 rebounds, 10 assists, and 3 steals in 35 minutes. Curry shot 9 for 23 from the field, 4 for 15 from 3, and he shot 5 for 6 from the foul line on the night. And then their starting shooting guard, Jordan Poole, would finish with 22 points and 3 steals in 32 minutes. He shot 8 for 16 from the field, and he shot a perfect 4 for 4 from the foul line on the night. With this win, the Golden State Warriors are now 3-0, and with this loss, the Sacramento Kings are now 1-2 to start their season. Last but not least, jumping out to Staples Center, the Los Angeles Lakers hosted the Memphis Grizzlies, and the Lakers would pick up their very first win of the season, beating the Grizzlies 121-118. After the Lakers came into the fourth quarter trailing by 3, they would outscore the Grizzlies by 6 to pull away with a 3-point win. For the Grizzlies in this matchup, they were led in scoring by their elite starting point guard out of Murray State. Ja Morant would finish with 40 points, 3 rebounds, 10 assists, and 3 steals, all alongside 6 turnovers in 38 minutes, as he shot 13 for 21 from the field, 5 for 7 from 3, and he shot 9 for 11 from the foul line. For the Los Angeles Lakers, they were led in scoring by their elite they were led off by their future Hall of Fame power forward off the bench, Carmelo Anthony. Anthony finished with 28 points and 2 blocks in 28 minutes. He shot 10 for 15 from the field, 6 for 8 from 3, and he shot a perfect 2 for 2 from the foul line. In the Lakers starting lineup, their elite starting power forward, Anthony Davis out of Kentucky, would finish with 22 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, and 4 blocks in 34 minutes. He shot 8 for 15 from the field, 1 for 3 from 3, and he shot 5 for 7 from the foul line. Their goated starting small forward, LeBron James, would finish with 19 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks in 40 minutes. LeBron shot 7 for 19 from the field, 4 for 9 from 3, and he shot 1 for 2 from the foul line. The Lakers' elite starting point guard, Russell Westbrook, would finish with 13 points, 7 rebounds, 13 assists, 4 steals, and 9 turnovers in 37 minutes, as he shot 5 for 15 from the field, 1 for 4 from 3, and he shot 2 for 4 from the foul line on the night. With this win, the Los Angeles Lakers are now 1-2, as all 3 of their games have been played in Staples Center so far. With this loss, the Memphis Grizzlies are now 2-1 this season. That is currently what the NBA is looking like, as of course, and of course, once all of today's matchups are done, I will come back tomorrow on Tuesday for another episode of The Elite. And then last but not least, taking a look at what went down in the world of soccer, starting off in the English Premier League. Tottenham Hotspur fell short 1-0 to West Ham, as Antonio would score the only goal of the game. With this loss, Tottenham Hotspur now drops to what is now 5th in the table, as they are now 4 points below first, or taking a look at where they are now, Tottenham is now sitting at 6th in the table, as they now trail first place Chelsea by 7 points in the table. Liverpool was able to beat Manchester United 5-0 in Old Trafford, as 3 of their goals would come from Liverpool's elite Egyptian forward Mo Salah. With this win, Liverpool now sits only 1 point behind Chelsea in the Premier League, as Liverpool sits 2nd in the entire table. Taking a look at what went down in Spanish La Liga, first, Atletico Madrid drew versus Real Sociedad, as both of their goals came from Luis Suarez in the second half, as they were down 2-0 at 1 point. With this draw, Atletico Madrid is currently sitting 4th in the La Liga table, as they now trail Real Sociedad by 3 points. And then Real Madrid was able to beat Barcelona 2-1 in El Clasico. This one took place in Barcelona. David Alaba, Real Madrid's elite midfielder now from Bayern, was able to score the first goal. And then Lucas Vazquez scored in the 94th minute. Barcelona's only goal will come in the 97th minute off of a goal from their newest elite striker, Sergio Kun Aguero. With this 2-1 win, Real Madrid now sits 2nd in the La Liga table, 1 point behind Real Sociedad with 1 less game played. And Barcelona now sits 9th in the La Liga table, as they now trail Real Sociedad by 6 points total in the table. Taking a look at what's going on with the German Bundesliga, not many big games going on there. And jumping to the Italian Serie A, the team that was undefeated coming into this matchup remains undefeated. Napoli picked up their very first draw of the season as they faced off against Roma. With this draw, they are now sitting even with AC Milan, as both of these teams are still roughly undefeated this year. And then Inter Milan was able to draw with Juventus, as Inter's only goal came from Edin Dzeko in the 17th minute. Juventus' only goal would come from a penalty kick from Paulo Dybala in the 89th minute. With this draw, Inter Milan now sits 3rd in the Serie A table, as they trail Napoli and Milan by 7 points. Juve now sits 6th in the table, sitting even with Atalanta and Fiorentina. Juventus sits 10 points behind Napoli and Milan in the Serie A tables. Looking at French Ligue 1, PSG drew with Marseille after Achraf Hakimi picked up the red card in the 57th minute. Following this draw, PSG is still sitting at the very top of Ligue 1, sitting 7 points ahead of second place Lens. And that's really what's going on in that table. And with that said, once all of today's matchups are done, I will come back tomorrow on Tuesday, October 26th for another episode of The Elite. And until then, I want to thank everyone for listening to this piece, and I will catch you with another episode tomorrow. I want to thank all of the NBA, NFL, and of course FIFA websites for giving me what I needed in order to do this episode. And once all exhibitions and matchups from today are done, I will come back tomorrow with another episode. So until then, I want to thank everyone for listening to this piece. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with another episode tomorrow. Peace out.